Hello, true crimerers. It is time for another compilation video from my TikTok page. So, today's theme is people who were murdered by a lover or by a stalker. This could be a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a creepy stalker. So, the following is going to be about 20 videos that each are about 3 minutes long or so. So again, expect a video to be around an hour. And like I always say in these videos, it's in TikTok format. It's vertical. It ain't pretty looking. It's got stickers. It's got different music for each video. So if you don't like to see that kind of stuff, I understand. You don't have to watch this. That's totally fine. But if you don't mind, then this video is cool to watch. All right, well, without further ado, here are 20 cases of people killed by lovers or stalkers. Viewer discretion is advised. This case is really fucked. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Brenda Sue Schaefer. Viewer discretion is advised. Brenda Schaefer was born in Louisville, Kentucky in April of 1952. She was described as someone being super intelligent, and she was a reliable and very punctual person, something that was necessary in her career, which she was a nursing assistant. In 1987, she went on a blind date with this man, a divorcee named Mel Ignatow. Yuck. Mel had 3 kids, and he was just a pretty normal, average dude. By 1988, they had been dating for about 2 years, and Brenda had issues with Mel, saying that he was abusive, and she wanted to leave him. So, after Brenda broke it off with him, on September 23rd, 1988, Mel was going to have Brenda bring over some jewelry of his that he had left at her place. Brenda would never be seen again. Her vehicle was found with a slashed tire on the side of the road the next day, but she just up and vanished. And police were having a hell of a time finding anyone who could have been responsible for it. Even her boyfriend. Mel says the last time he saw her was 11 p.m. on September 23rd. He said the relationship was going great and they even set up a wedding date. Okay, Mel. After some time, police began to think that Brenda was likely murdered. And Mel here agreed to testify in front of a grand jury just to clear his name. That's when he brought up his ex-girlfriend, Mary Ann Shore. Police would question her, even put her in front of a grand jury. She would actually confess that she was there and assisted Mel kill Brenda Schaefer. Mel tied Brenda to his coffee table. He tortured her and sexually abused her, and Mary Ann Shore took photos. He beat her with a paddle, and then he suffocated Brenda with chloroform. Mary Ann Shore would then take police to where they buried her, just behind her house. 1 year later, after she disappeared, the remains of Brenda Sue Schaefer were found. Police had Mary Ann Shore wear a wire and talk to Mel Ignatow. He made a lot of statements that implied, yeah, we did this. But when he went on trial, the jury felt that Mary Ann Shore was the actual killer and that she was just framing him. He was acquitted. Yep. Mary Ann Shore was already given a deal, so she couldn't be prosecuted for murder. A while later, police found the camera with all the photos, but double jeopardy applied. He can't be retried. He even confessed to a grand jury that he did in fact kill Brenda, and there wasn't a goddamn thing anyone can do. In September of 2008, Mel died by falling over and cutting himself and bleeding to death. He was shot 3 times in the face, but it would be ruled a self-unaliving. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of James Lee. Viewer discretion is advised. On March 25th, 2017, in their Scottsdale, Arizona home, Dr. James Lee's wife, Nancy, would find him dead in bed. She frantically called 911. The belief is that he did this to himself. The way James was positioned, he had his left arm over his head like this. It's how he slept. His right arm was draped over the side of the bed, and the 9mm pistol A Beretta PX4 Storm was lying on the ground beneath his right hand. During the 911 call, Nancy would be reportedly heard saying he did it to himself, but their son, John, who was also at the house, said, "Fuck you, he didn't do that to himself." Apparently you can hear this on the phone call. The autopsy would reveal that the cause of death was undetermined. James didn't have one gunshot, or two. He had 3 gunshots through his face. One of the bullets was embedded in his skull. Now, it is possible that a person could fire 3 shots themselves. It is extremely uncommon, but it has happened. But no one would believe that he did this to himself. James was a really happy guy. He and Nancy were both researchers at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, a building I've passed by many, many times. The two of them had their own research lab, and they were specializing in asthma research. Their work was renowned. Both are described as extremely intelligent human beings, and always on the verge of something profound. James loved his job. He was on the verge of getting a new job for a university here in Arizona. He was described around the lab as a happy-go-lucky guy, just excited about the world. Nancy was described as the opposite. She had an incident in 2004. She went on a hike on Monument Mountain in Massachusetts one time. She fell about 40 feet and struck her head. She would eventually recover and get back to work. But her mental state just took a big turn. She had very unusual behavior. She would go off on these crazy tangents. Like, she actually accused her husband of orchestrating the 9/11 attacks and also being responsible for the anthrax attacks that happened soon after. Her children said that she would punch him repeatedly. She abused him. She wanted a divorce. He wanted to work it out for the kids. The gun was hers. She bought it just a month prior. James's fingerprints weren't on the gun or the gun case. Nancy had become incredibly unstable, but to this day, no one has been arrested, and no charges filed. Wow. Domestic violence globally has affected 736 million women, or 1 out of every 3 women. This is just one of those stories. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Natalie Ramstrom. Viewer discretion is advised. Natalie was a 36-year-old mother of 2 from River Rouge, Michigan. She worked with second graders as a teacher's aide at Three Creeks Elementary School. By 2020, she was dating a 41-year-old electrician by the name of Efren Medina. According to friends and family, the relationship was littered with one-sided domestic violence. It was alleged that Efren was abusing Natalie, both physically and emotionally. And before anyone says anything snarky, these types of situations aren't the easiest to get out of. They're not simple to escape from. In a lot of cases, the victim of the abuse becomes terrified of leaving their abuser, fearing the worst. Efren was known to be a very jealous man, and Natalie was not allowed to talk to other men, and if she did, Efren would become violent. Natalie would be seen at the elementary school with bruises and scratches on her body. In October 2020, Natalie hadn't shown up for work for a couple of days, and none of her family or friends could get a hold of her. So they reported her missing. And they asked the officers to do a wellness check on the apartment she was living in with Efren. When they arrived, Efren was not there, but they found the body of Natalie Ramstrom. Natalie was shot one time in the back of the head, execution style. Police had one suspect, Efren Medina. You see, he just shot her, wrapped her up in a plastic sheet, and then he went to work. When police got to his place of employment, his fellow co-workers tipped him off that police were there, so he escaped. He stole a maintenance vehicle from his job, fled to Illinois, and then he fled down to Mexico. And he evaded capture for nearly a year, when in September of 2021, he tried to cross back into the United States from Mexico. But thankfully, because of a warrant for his arrest, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection flagged him, and they detained him. He has since been charged with first-degree murder, amongst other charges. A trial has not been set yet, and Natalie's 2 daughters have to grow up without a mother. His motive has not been revealed. Domestic violence is no joke. That was the haunting sound of a parrot solving a murder. And I am not joking. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Marty Durham. Viewer discretion is advised. By the time this case happened, Marty and Glenna Durham had been married for about 11 years. Between the two of them, they had 5 kids, but all from previous marriages. So none of them are actually like their kids together. Marty, back in 1995, had experienced a pretty traumatic car accident, which actually left him with some pretty severe brain damage. It actually messed up his entire left side of his body, to the point where he wasn't really able to work, so he collected disability, and really that was the only income the family got. Glenna also earned money for basically being his caretaker, if you will. However, this was not really the happiest of couples. They would constantly argue, and it had a lot to do with the fact that Glenna was just always wanting to spend money, which they just didn't really have a lot of. They needed that money to take care of the kids, the house, make car payments, that kind of thing. But she wanted to blow it on gambling. She had basically an addiction to gambling. Glenna wanted this lavish lifestyle, but she just wasn't going to have it. She would spend hundreds of dollars a week on lottery tickets, never winning. These are more just like family photos of Marty and his kids. Marty unfortunately had to put Glenna in charge of paying the bills because he just wasn't able to. Turns out that wasn't the greatest option. You see, she wasn't really paying the bills. She wasn't paying money towards the house. She wasn't paying the car payment. So one day the car got repossessed and Marty's like, what the hell? And she's like, oh, must be a mistake. And then they find out the house is being foreclosed on. Marty found out in the newspaper. Yeah, Glenna wasn't paying that either. In May of 2015, a neighbor noticed they hadn't seen Marty or Glenna in a couple of days. The kids must have been with other family members. The neighbors would go inside the house because it was unlocked, and there they found something awful. Marty was laying on the ground, face down. He had been shot 5 times, and he was dead. Glenna was also on the ground. She had a gunshot behind her ear, and she appeared to be dead. So, obviously the police were called, and that's when they noticed that Glenna was actually still alive. But after she recovered, she said, I have no memory of what happened. The bullet only grazed her. It didn't actually enter anywhere. Well, a few days later, the kids were back at the house, and they were cleaning the house, and they found an envelope. The envelope consisted of several letters that Glenna had wrote to her family. Basically, they were all self-unaliving notes. All of her children, even her ex-husband, all got a letter. Oddly enough, Marty didn't get one. So if she was planning to end her own life, why didn't she give one to her husband? Police found it odd. So did she shoot Marty and then try to shoot herself and it failed? Now, when police questioned her about those letters, by the way, she said, I have no memory of writing them. Then, police were looking through her cell phone, and they noticed that she had been looking up information about Ruger pistols. She again says, no, that wasn't me, I didn't do that, I only play games on my phone. And, the family, Marty's family was like, Glenna obviously did this, like, you guys have to know, but police were like, we don't have anything. And then, the parrot. You see, Marty had this beautiful parrot. This is his African gray parrot, which was given back to his ex-wife after his passing. And she took a video because something sounded extremely haunting to her. You see, the parrot seemed to be having an argument with itself. So she turned on her cell phone and recorded the parrot going back and forth between 2 distinct voices having an argument. And then all of a sudden, you hear this. The parrot said, don't fucking shoot. They determined that those were Marty's final words. The other voice it was mimicking was clearly a higher-pitched female voice. So police looked more into Glenna because of this, and they noticed that the day of the murder, the house was due to be sold at auction. So this must mean an argument took place because Glenna now had to face Marty with all of this, that she screwed up everything. So she reacted. They got into a fight, and she shot him 5 times. And then attempted to put a bullet in her own head, I guess. And then she managed to throw the gun so it would slide underneath the couch. Because she failed to end her own life, she was arrested and charged with the murder of Marty. And due in large part to that awesome little parrot, she got life in prison without the possibility of parole. Drop the soap. Oh wait, maybe it doesn't work in your prison. An obsessed stalker from Germany would become a murderer in Sweden. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Christine Schurrer. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this story, Christine was a 32-year-old from Hanover, Germany. She had a pretty normal upbringing. She would travel to the States a few times for studying. She would then go back to Germany where she studied history for many years. And in 2006, she would vacation in Crete, which is in Greece. There, she met a fellow vacationer from Sweden. His name was Torgny Helgren. And while in Greece, they had a fun little time, if you know what I mean. They tossed around some Greek salad, if you catch my drift. I don't think I do. To Torgny, it was just a silly little fling. To Christine, he was now the love of her life. After the vacation was over, Christine returned to Germany and Torgny returned to Sweden, but they kept in contact via text. Christine would eventually visit him a couple times in the town of Arboga in Sweden, which felt kind of strange to him. By 2007, he would text her that this needs to stop and it's over. Christine took the breakup like a normal person and she never contacted him again. And I'm lying. At one point, she told him that she's gonna end her own life. Another time, Cuckoo Cuckoo here told him that she had his baby and that she gave him up for adoption. She even wrote a letter pretending to be the person who adopted the baby and sent it to Torgny. Girl, she never had a baby. Sometime towards the end of 2007 or beginning of 2008, she moved to Sweden. This is when Torgny was like, listen, I have moved on. I am now dating a woman and she has 2 kids. We're happy. She then admits herself into a psychiatric hospital in Stockholm, saying she tried to end her own life again, but then she's eventually released. This was the home of Torgny's 23-year-old girlfriend, Emma, and her 2 kids. Christine found out where she lived and she kind of stalked the home for a few days. And then on March 17th, 2008, Christine knocks on the door. Emma answers the door and she is immediately greeted by Christine, who is wielding a hammer. Christine then proceeds to bash the hammer into Emma's head many, many times. And then Christine notices the 2 children had witnessed this. 3-year-old Max and 1-year-old Saga. Christine took the hammer to both of them as well. She had killed both of them. When police arrived, the scene was a nightmare, but Christine was gone, and these 2 beautiful children were dead. Emma would miraculously survive. When she came to, she told authorities who did this. Christine was arrested in Germany. Christine was put on trial in August, where she was deemed not insane. She was convicted and got life in prison. On July 16, 1982, in LaFeria, Texas, a man would capture on audio his own murder. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Billy and Leticia. Viewer discretion is advised. Billy was a 26-year-old construction worker living in LaFeria, Texas, and he was recently engaged to 26-year-old Leticia Castro. This was not Billy's first marriage. He had previously been married to Sherry Wolf, who is now married to a man by the name of Paul Wolf. The 2 of them had a 2-year-old daughter together named Melanie. A very acrimonious custody battle would take place between Billy and Sherry. Sherry would falsely claim that Billy was violent towards Melanie and that Melanie was afraid to ever go with him. See, ultimately, she just wanted full custody of Melanie. But Billy was always cooperative. He was always kind to Melanie. He loved that little girl. Billy and Leticia were set to get married on August 7th, 1982, but that would not get to happen. On July 16th, 1982, the two of them would drive to Sherry and Paul's house to pick up Melanie, because it was his time with her. But Sherry and Paul said they never got there, and the two of them would never be seen alive again. Police would go inside the home of Sherry and Paul just to question them. They noticed little tiny blood spots throughout the house. Nothing crazy, it just caught their eye. And then, out of nowhere, a few days later, Paul Wolf would go inside the sheriff's department and confess to killing Billy and Leticia. But he said it was in self-defense. He said Billy became enraged and fought with him, so he had no choice but to kill him. Leticia then saw what happened, and then she started fighting him, so he had to kill her too. And he would tell police where their bodies were. So they took him to this marsh area where they found Billy's car, which was burned out. They would find Billy, and then they would find Leticia, both in separate drainage ditches. Next to Leticia's body, they found a shotgun shell casing, which is weird because Paul said he had only just beat them both to death. He never mentioned guns. But here's where Paul's story falls flat. Strapped to Billy's body was a tape recorder. You see, Billy's lawyer advised him to do that to record conversations between he and Sherry, to prove that Sherry was lying. They sent it to the FBI, and it caught the entire killing on tape. Obviously, I can't play it for you guys, but on the ID Network show The Devil Speaks, Season 2, Episode 1, you can hear it. You hear Billy talking to Melanie, and all of a sudden a loud whack, and Billy is then silent. You then hear Paul say, "Drag him over here." They enlisted the help of a friend, 18-year-old Glenn Henderson. Also on the tape, you can hear Sherry telling Paul to hit him again. Paul and Glenn then went out to the car where Leticia was waiting, and they beat her to death with a hammer. When they were getting rid of the bodies, Leticia was still alive, so Glenn shot her with a shotgun. Also captured on audio. All three got life in prison. Hello to the true crimerers of Sweden. This is the case of Jonna Henningsson. Viewer discretion is advised. Jonna was born in 1989. She grew up with a love of horses, and eventually she would find what she would describe as the love of her life, Jonas. At one point she said that Jonas was like a drug to her. The two of them met in 2013, they hit it off, but then they had one of those sort of back and forth relationships where they would be together, then they wouldn't be, it'd be together, then they wouldn't be. Well, at one point, Jonna, she got pregnant, and Jonas did not want the baby. As a matter of fact, he told her, "You need to get an abortion now." Now, she would lie to Jonas that she had got it done just to appease him, but then not too soon later, she actually got the abortion because she felt that would be more in her control. Soon after this, Jonas would give her all the affection and love in the world. But then, an old friend of Jonas's came into the picture. Her name was Lovisa, and Jonna became immediately jealous of her. She noticed that Lovisa was the very top person on Jonas's Snapchat friend list. This was back when it had like rankings and you can see who their best friends were. Jonna said, "You've got to stop talking to her." He's like, "Okay, babe, okay." Then one night, the three of them, and that includes Lovisa, were at a nightclub. The two women would confront Jonas, saying, "You've got to pick one of us." Jonas, being a man, he still tried to find a way to keep both of them in his life. Jonna then took this as a sign that she needs to do something to get more affection from him, so she cut her stomach open. She told Jonas that she had an operation just so she can get more sympathy from him, and it worked. Well, one day Jonna went to Jonas's apartment and noticed that Lovisa was there. Jonas wasn't, he was at work or something. So she came up with a plan. "I'm gonna hit her with a hammer just to knock her out." So Jonna waited until Lovisa walked out of the apartment, and then she struck her in the head. She did so with this hammer. Lovisa didn't pass out, but she was moaning and groaning and she was in obvious pain. So Jonna dragged her back into the apartment. Lovisa wouldn't stop making noises, so Jonna injected her with a syringe full of vodka. And then she started stabbing her until she was dead. She tried to get the body into one garbage bag, but realized she couldn't. So she dismembered Lovisa, put her into several bags, cleaned up the apartment, and then dumped her in the woods, where she would later be found. Jonna was an immediate suspect, but they had some other suspects in mind too. But eventually Jonna would confess to the murder. It was all out of jealous rage. So she went on trial, she was convicted, and she only got 16 years in prison. This was due to sentencing laws at the time, which have since changed. Yikes. She looks like every single normal, sweet, innocent mom. She wasn't. Not even remotely fucking close. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Shirley Turner. Viewer discretion is advised. I gotta go fast because there's a lot. Shirley was born on January 28, 1961 in Newfoundland, Canada. By 1980, she enrolled in medical school because her passion was to become a doctor. Between 1981 and 1993, she had been married twice and divorced both times, and between both of those men, she had 3 children. In 1993, she had a roommate living with her, and that roommate witnessed her physically and emotionally abusing her children all the time. She would use her fist, she would use a belt. And this wasn't always a matter of discipline, she would just abuse the kids. This was all reported to social services. They did nothing. They didn't even go to her home. She also took out baby bonuses for her kids, which, guess what? She never used for her kids. She used only for herself. In 1996, she began a relationship with a man by the name of Miles Dowsett. He broke up with her at one point, and she was not happy about that. She would stalk him. She would harass him by phone. She went to his place of work and hit him over the head with a high-heel shoe. Miles would move away from Canada and go to Pennsylvania. She followed him. She continued to stalk him. She left him threatening voicemails. She kept going to his apartment unannounced. In April of 1999, she tried to end her own life on his doorstep. She survived, and then that would be the end of the story with Miles. In 1999, she met Andrew Bagby. Their relationship was decent. In 2000, he would move to New York, she would move to Iowa, but they had a long-distance relationship. Shirley would buy a gun, and she also would continually harass Andrew. Even though they were still kind of in a relationship, it was becoming ridiculous. She would start emotionally abusing him over the phone. She stalked him at his apartment in New York. In November of 2001, he's like, "I'm done, we're over." Shirley then drove 16 hours from Iowa to New York with her gun. She threatened him at his apartment. He managed to calm her down. He said, "Okay, I'll meet you after work." His coworker said, "Please don't do that." He did anyway. The following morning, Andrew Bagby was discovered dead. He had been shot 5 times next to his car. They questioned Shirley. She was like, I'm not even in that state. But they were able to prove that she was absolutely in that state, that she was even in his apartment. But she fled to Canada. In 2002, she gave birth to Zachary, Andrew's son. She was arrested for Andrew's murder, was released on bail. She fled back to Canada. A custody battle took place, but Shirley would kidnap Zachary, strap him to her chest, and she would drown them both. Note to self, never get a husband. They will kill you. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Michael George. Viewer discretion is advised. Michael and Barbara here, they would meet while they were both in their early 20s and they were working at a comic book store together. They went on to date, and then after about 2 years, they got hitched. A little bit down the road, they would open up Comics World, a comic book store in Clinton Township, Michigan. July of 1990, Michael was about to turn 30 years old. So Barbara, being the loving wife that she was, wanted to throw him a surprise party at their comic book store. 6 p.m., July 13th, 1990. Customers would walk in the door of Comic Book World. They looked around and they saw that no one was there. And these were regular customers. They knew Barbara and they knew Michael well. Now, it's not unlike them to not be at the cash register, but it is unlike them to not be in the store anywhere. There were also a couple of teenagers inside the store that kind of walked in the same time as this older couple did. And the teenagers were the first two to go looking for anyone in the building. They turned around to the back room, which was in disarray, and lying face down on the ground was Barbara George. They called 911. The ambulance rushed her to the hospital where she would be pronounced dead. She had died of a single gunshot wound to the head. The register still had hundreds and hundreds of dollars in it. Barbara's purse and belongings, she also had a couple $100s. None of the glass cases holding in the comic books were broken or forced open, so it wasn't robbery. Police, of course, immediately questioned Michael. He is the husband, after all. They asked him for his alibi. He said at 4 p.m. that afternoon, he picked up the kids and went straight to his mother's house. And he was there for a few hours. His mother said for about 40 to 45 minutes, he was alone in her house because she had taken the kids to a nearby park. They asked Michael, was there anything wrong with the marriage? Were you having an affair? He said, no, of course not, we're good. Yeah, that was a lie. Because he was secretly having an affair with this woman, Renee Cotula. She worked at the comic book store. In fact, Barbara got her the job. Okay, this is a red flag. Another red flag? He collected a life insurance policy off of Barbara. Oof. But unfortunately, there was no physical evidence connecting him to her murder. He said there were several $1,000s worth of comic books missing, so there was a robber for sure. 2007. A witness comes forward to say that he called the comic book store that night, and Michael picked up the phone when he was supposed to be at his mother's. This was enough to arrest him. In 2008, he went on trial and was found guilty, but that was then overturned. He was tried again in 2011, found guilty again. He got life. Beyond all reasonable doubt is how a person should be convicted of a crime. And this case kind of has a lot of it. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case known as the Clydach murders. Viewer discretion is advised. Clydach is a small town or community in the Swansea area of Wales, which is in the United Kingdom. And pictured here is 34-year-old Mandy Power with her two daughters, 10-year-old Katie and 8-year-old Emily. And this was Katie's 80-year-old mother, Doris Dawson. And together they lived here in this home. Here in their home, in the early morning hours of June 27th, 1999, a horrific murder would take place. Attention was called to the home in the first place because there were fires coming out of it. And you can kind of see the burn marks there on the walls. When firefighters and the authorities arrived, they would uncover the bodies of the 4 occupants. Mandy Power, her mother Doris, and the 2 young girls had all been bludgeoned to death. And then the killer set the house on fire, hoping to cover up their crime. And for the most part, they kind of succeeded in that because there really wasn't much physical evidence left behind. Now, originally, police focused their attention on a lover of Mandy Power, and that was her, Allison Lewis, a former police officer who was married to a current police officer. His name is Stephen. Mandy and Allison were having a very torrid affair, and allegedly Allison was a very jealous person. And these two were actually arrested along with Stephen's twin brother for suspicion of committing this murder. But due to lack of any substantial evidence and witness testimonies, they were actually allegedly cleared. Mandy was also having a sexual affair with someone else, a man by the name of David Morris. In the home at the murder scene, they did find a gold chain, which David Morris had recently lost his gold chain necklace. He claimed it was left there at the house a few days prior to the murders, which obviously police have no way of knowing for sure, but witnesses would testify that he was actually wearing that gold chain necklace literally the night before the murders. But why kill Mandy and the kids and the mother? There was no motive. Some say that Mandy threatened to expose him to his current girlfriend, but there was no proof of that. But he would be arrested for the murders anyway, and he was actually convicted of it. But then his conviction was overturned due to his defense attorney's misconduct, and so he was put on trial again, where he was reconvicted. In 2018, police said they finally tested blood left on a sock at the crime scene, and that DNA finally matched David Morris. But that's it. His conviction was essentially hearsay, but he died in prison at the age of 59. Quote, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one that I took. If you send a patrol car to 826 North Rampart, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend and a full signed confession from myself." End quote. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Zack and Addie. Viewer discretion is advised. Addie Hall was free-spirited and artistic. She also suffered from bipolar disorder. Zach Bowen was an Army veteran who served 2 consecutive tours, and he was dealing with untreated PTSD. The two of them would meet while bartending at a bar in the French Quarter in New Orleans, Louisiana. They would fall in love almost instantly, and then they would have fights. A lot. Some of them got pretty crazy. One could say their relationship was very stormy, like a hurricane. And then a real hurricane hit, Hurricane Katrina. Zack and Addie decided to tough it out while living in their apartment, which was here above a voodoo shop. They would serve food and alcohol to their neighbors who also stayed behind. They became little local legends, heroes. And then the devastation passed and moved on. At some point in 2006, Addie realized or found out or was told that Zack was cheating on her. So what she did was she put her name only on the apartment above the voodoo store. This caused an explosive fight. And Zack, well, he took it to a whole new level. On October 5th, 2006, in the little apartment above the voodoo shop, Zack would strangle Addie to death. It is then believed that he sexually assaulted her corpse. He went back to work the next day like nothing happened. Everyone said he was super quiet, reserved, like something was bothering him. Gee, I wonder what. Back at the apartment, Zack decided he needed to do something about her body. So he dismembered her. He cut her up in the bathtub. He put her head in a pot on the stove. After giving her a haircut, apparently. He then put her hands and her feet in another pot on the stove, her legs and arms in the oven, and put her torso in the refrigerator. Zack lied to their friends and family, saying that she just moved back to North Carolina. On October 17th, 2006, Zack scribbled out a suicide note, which I read part of it at the beginning, and he jumped off the 7th floor of a hotel, ending his own life. His suicide note directed police to the body of Addie. Mental health can be a real son of a bitch. On the afternoon of April 30th, 2012, a woman's body would be found floating near the banks of Colo Creek in Australia. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Allison Baden-Clay. Viewer discretion is advised. She was born in Queensland, Australia on July 1st, 1968, as Allison June Dickey. In her youth, she would be a very talented ballet dancer. On August 23rd, 1997, she would marry this man, Gerard Robert Baden-Clay. He was originally from the UK. Gerard would work as a real estate agent for his family's company, and Allison would eventually become a stay-at-home mom to their 3 daughters. Almost immediately after the two of them got married, Gerard's behavior would change. He would become very controlling towards Allison. He would use the baby monitors they had to spy on conversations she was having in the house. He deleted the phone numbers of some of her friends and relatives and blocked them from being able to reach her. The funny thing is, with how controlling he is of her, he's having an affair with a coworker. He took out an 800,000 Australian dollar life insurance policy on her. Well, you can pretty much figure out where this is going then, right? By 2011, 2012 or so, it will be reported that they were having some financial issues. The real estate market at the time was not doing so well because of a recent flood. And allegedly, Allison had finally discovered that her husband was having an affair. And then, on April 20th, 2012, at approximately 7:15 a.m., Gerard would call 000, their police. Allison had gone for her normal 5 a.m. jog, but never returned. Police were very suspicious of Gerard from the get-go because he had very obvious scratches on his face. He also had some on his chest. They found traces of blood inside of Allison's car. And then on the afternoon of April 30th, 2012, the body of Allison Baden-Clay would be found. Her cause of death could not be determined, but it was clear to the coroner that it was due to foul play. Allison had been murdered. After an investigation that lasted a little over a month, Gerard was arrested and charged with murder and also interfering with a corpse. It is believed the motive was that Allison found out about the affair, and he also needed $800,000. On July 15th, 2014, he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to 15 years to life. A mother's love can sometimes be as strong as a motherfucker. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Stephen Davis. Viewer discretion is advised. And we are going to the Philippines for this one, folks, specifically to the city of Makati, which is like the financial district, I guess. Stephen Davis worked with computers, and at one point he moved to England, and then eventually to Hong Kong, and he would spend a lot of his free time or vacation time in the Philippines. And in the Philippines is where he would eventually meet a young dancer by the name of Evelyn. And the two of them would get married. The body language isn't so welcoming here. They would go on to have a couple of children together. Stephen's parents were never really big fans of Evelyn, but they made it work because they loved their grandchildren, and obviously they loved Stephen. On the late evening of July 17th, 2002, Stephen was hanging out at his apartment with some friends and coworkers. His apartment in Makati was basically for work. He would stay there throughout the work week. And then Evelyn would live full-time in the apartment the two of them shared when he wasn't busy with work. At any rate, on that July 17th, 2002 evening, a couple of men, strangers, busted into his apartment. They pointed guns at one of Stephen's co-workers who was crashing there that night. They then left him alone, went into Stephen's bedroom. The co-worker says he then heard several gunshots, and then the men suddenly just left. They didn't harm the friend or co-worker at all. Stephen had been shot multiple times. He was rushed to the hospital, but he would eventually die. Police ruled out robbery because nothing was stolen. They ruled out any sort of business deals gone wrong. Stephen's mother, Margaret Davis, she had some odd feelings about Evelyn. But for some reason, the police, they wouldn't investigate her. So Margaret says, fuck it, I'll do it myself then. She flew to the Philippines. She hired a private investigator, and together they questioned witnesses. They collected all of the information, and this tough-as-nails mom found out who killed her son without the help of the police. She found out that Evelyn was having an affair with this man, Arnold Adore. Stephen found out. He also found out that Evelyn was taking all of the money for the school's college fund and spending it on herself. So Stephen cut her off, and that pissed her off. Stephen's mother handed over all the evidence, gave them their suspects, and 3 men were charged with his murder. They were all convicted. She was convicted for conspiring the whole thing, and Grandma and Grandpa got the kids. This is a story about how a little kitty cat solved a murder. Meow. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Shirley Duguay. Viewer discretion is advised. Shirley lived here on Prince Edward Island, which is located in Canada. The 32-year-old mother of 5 children lived here in this house. She had an estranged common-law husband named Douglas Beamish. On August 7th, 1994, this exact vehicle was found abandoned in the middle of a field. The license plate had been removed. The RCMP was able to determine that this was in fact the vehicle that belonged to Shirley Duguay, and she had apparently been missing since October 3rd. Inside the vehicle was one of horror. All the little white tape spots there are where blood spatter was found, and this is in the back seat of the car. They also had a bunch of blood splatter across the windshield and dashboard of the vehicle, but Shirley was nowhere to be found. The amount of blood splatter in the vehicle wasn't enough to say for certain that she had been killed, although it didn't look very promising. It wouldn't be until May 7th, 1995, that the decomposed body of Shirley would be found. She was found buried in a very shallow grave. She was found with her hands tied behind her back, and it appeared she had been strangled. They also determined that she had been beaten, which would explain all of the blood spatter in the vehicle. Near her body, they found this shovel, a white bag with some sneakers in it with blood drops on it, and this leather jacket, also with blood stains on it. On this jacket, they also found tiny white hairs. Now, the blood would be determined to come from Shirley, even though this jacket didn't belong to her because it was way too big. Now, in the investigation, the RCMP saw that Douglas Beamish had a white cat named Snowball. So they thought, well, could the white hairs on the jacket be that from Snowball? Something like this has never been done before. But they extracted some hairs from his cat. They also took a blood sample from Snowball. And then using a very comprehensive test, which included a fail-safe, so they tested a whole bunch of other cats in the area, just to make sure that the DNA from Snowball, in fact, matched the DNA from the hairs on the jacket. And it did. Meaning that the leather jacket for sure belonged to Douglas Beamish. Meaning he was there, which puts Douglas at the scene of the crime. He was subsequently arrested and charged with murder. And in July of 1996, he was found guilty and sentenced to 18 years to life, where he is still in prison. Rock on, Snowball! Yeah! Imagine being an Army veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq with a gun in his hand, too afraid to enter his darkened home to possibly save his wife. Hello, true crimerers! This is the case of Desiree Sunford. Viewer discretion is advised. Scott and Desiree Sunford were married in 2003. They were high school sweethearts from Yakima, Washington. They bonded over their love of motorcycles, and they seemed like a perfectly normal, happy couple. But were they? They would move into this house, which is obviously in a pretty desolate location, and about 6 months after their move, the home was broken into and a couple of valuable items were stolen, but no one was hurt. So Scott had a security system installed. A couple of days after they installed that security system, Scott was out of town attending a funeral. Desiree remained behind at home. And on April 7th, 2013, while he was away, at about 3:30 in the morning, the security alarm of the house was tripped, and he was alerted by his phone. He tried getting a hold of Desiree, but she wouldn't answer. So he calls the police and says, I need you guys to go check on my house and check on my wife. The alarm was tripped and I think something might be wrong. When police arrive at the house, Scott is already there. He has a gun in his hand pointed directly at the house, but he says he's too uncomfortable to go inside. Like I said in the intro, Scott served in the Army, 2 tours in Iraq. He's a big, tough, strong guy. And police found it very strange that he wouldn't go in, especially if his wife was in danger. When police enter the home, they do find the deceased body of Desiree Sunford. She was shot 9 times. So Scott was questioned by police, obviously. Scott said the night of the murder he was staying at a friend's house, Paige Blades. It would later be revealed that these two were having an affair. But Desiree knew about it. In fact, they had this 3-way relationship thing going on where Paige at one point lived with them, they all slept in the same bed, and then at one point Desiree would text Paige listen, I'm uncomfortable with this, I don't like this anymore. Police checked Paige's cell phone records and confirmed that she was nowhere near the Sunford residence. A year later, Paige drops a bombshell. She's found out who killed Desiree. A co-worker of hers, a man by the name of Marty Durham, a man who was kind of obsessed with Paige. He allegedly confessed to the murder to Paige. He said he did it so that Paige and Scott can have a new life together. Police found the stolen items from the home in his workplace. They also found the murder weapon, so he was charged with her murder. Marty signed an Alford plea, and he got 15 years to life. I think they planned it. Quote, "We were soulmates. Everything about her was just truth. I killed the most beautiful girl I've ever met." End quote. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Zoe Sarnacki. Viewer discretion is advised, and this one is pretty crazy. This case takes place in Portland, Maine, in May of 2009. Zoe was 18 years old and considered very worldly. She was extremely interested in learning about religion. She wanted to travel the world. She wanted to learn and embrace different cultures. And she was just such a very happy, very positive, influential person. But all of that would be snuffed out. This is 29-year-old Chad Gurney. Back in 2005, he was involved in a really serious crash. A crash that would lead to him needing multiple surgeries. It created a lot of issues in his head, his brain, And on the flip side, he also received a massive financial payout. So he too began to travel. He was considered to be very worldly as well. In terms of life plans, something similar along the lines of Zoe. Zoe and Chad met at a tattoo parlor in March of 2009. Chad alleges that the two of them got along great. They became quick friends and possibly even more. Chad wanted to travel the world, and he would have loved to have Zoe go along with him. Now, allegedly, Zoe was showing interest in another man. A lot of the articles state that Zoe and Chad were boyfriend and girlfriend, but I'm having a hard time validating that. I don't truly know if that was the case, but Zoe was living with Chad kind of off and on in his loft apartment in Maine. On May 25th, 2009, Zoe was sleeping in the loft when Chad just climbed on top of her and began to choke her. She struggled, she slapped at him, and then he headbutted her to subdue her. He then continued to forcibly choke her until she was dead. But he was not done. He would then sexually assault her corpse. He then decapitated her, and he used 3 different knives to do it. He put a crucifix between her legs and then set her on fire. Within 12 hours, he was arrested and he confessed. He was asked, "Did she do something to upset you?" He said no. Why did he do it? He couldn't really say. He said he was possessed. He was a monster. Well, that last part's true. At his trial, he tried to claim that he was insane. And quite possibly, he might have been. He waived his right to a jury trial. The judge would rule he was not insane, and he was convicted of murder. And he got 60 years. He'll be in his 90s. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Lindsay Hawker. Viewer discretion is advised. Lindsay was born on December 30th, 1984 in Coventry, England. She would go to school at the University of Leeds, and by 2006, she was actually teaching English in Japan, specifically in Tokyo. On March 20th, 2007, Lindsay would be approached by this man, Tatsuya Ishihashi. He was a 28-year-old, essentially living off of his mother and father's wealth. Lindsay told her boyfriend how she actually met Ishihashi through email first, and then very shortly after that, she was approached by him on a train while she was on her way home. She told her boyfriend that Ishihashi said that he was actually a student of hers, but he wasn't. He followed her home one day and asked if I could come inside to get a drink of water. Okay, it's kind of creepy, very creepy. Now, Lindsay was living with 2 other flatmates at the time, and she would use the 2 of them as sort of like, hey, you can't do anything to me, Mr. Ishihashi, because my 2 roommates are here right now. But eventually, Lindsay would say, you know what, fine, I can give you English lessons. So they made plans to meet at a cafe, a very public cafe. So on March 24th, 2007, Lindsay met Tatsuya at that cafe. After the lesson was over, they took a taxi back to Tatsuya's apartment. When they got there, Lindsay told the cab driver, hey, just wait here just for a few minutes, I'll be right back down. Why she went up there with him, I actually don't know. About 10 minutes later, the cab driver left because Lindsay never came back. Lindsay would be reported missing the very next day. Authorities quickly learned that she had gone to Tatsuya's apartment, so they went there. When they arrived, Tatsuya bolted. He ran. When they got to his apartment, on the balcony was a bathtub full of compost, and it also contained the body of Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay was bound, she was gagged, she was beaten. They determined that she was hit with pieces of furniture. It was brutal. Authorities would find CCTV footage of Lindsay with Tatsuya, and this is literally just a couple hours before she was killed. For 2 years, Tatsuya was on the run. They actually made these talking cutouts to try to get people to see if they could help. That's really creepy. They found him on CCTV cameras, but they were never able to capture him in time. They quickly learned that he did plastic surgery on himself. Yeah. By December of 2009, so about 2 years later, he was finally caught. He would say he killed her because she was screaming while he attempted to sexually assault her. Yeah, go figure. In 2011, he was sentenced to life in prison. Note to self: never ever anger a woman. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Katherine Knight. Viewer discretion is advised. Katherine was born on October 24th, 1955 in Tenterfield, Australia. Her father was a horrible person. He would sexually assault her mother multiple times a day. She, too, was allegedly sexually assaulted by various family members. This obviously would cause some trauma, so throughout her schooling years, she was known to be a bit of a bully. In 1974, she met David Kellett. They married, and on day one of their marriage, she tried to strangle him to death. But believe it or not, he stayed with her, and she was a belligerent drunk. Her mother told him that she has some screws loose. When she found out David was being unfaithful, she took their newborn baby and put it on a railroad track as punishment to him. Thankfully, the baby was fine. They stayed married for about 10 years, unbelievably. She would then have some on-again, off-again relationships with other men. She would end up having 4 children with 3 different men. One of her boyfriends, she would take his 2-month-old dingo puppy and slit its throat in front of him to prove what she's capable of. That same man she would later attempt to kill by stabbing him with scissors. She failed. By 1995, she had met and moved in with another man, John Charles Thomas Price. At one point, she would ask him to marry her. He said no. She didn't like that. So she framed him at his work for stealing company property, and it got him fired. But eventually, they would still remain together. Here in the little town of Aberdeen in New South Wales, Australia, on a February 2000 day, Charles would attempt to take out a restraining order against Katherine. He then told co-workers, "If anything happens to me, it's her." And that anything happened. On February 29th, 2000, a leap year, Katherine stabbed John Price 37 times here in this house. She then hung him from a meat hook. She cut off his head, she skinned him, and dismembered him. She then boiled his severed head in a pot and added carrots and onions and celery. This is not actual pictures, but she intended to serve his remains to his children. She then OD'd on sleeping pills but survived. She would be arrested, and she would plead guilty to murder, and Katherine Knight is sentenced to life in prison, never to be released. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Joyce Klindt. Viewer discretion is advised. Joyce lived with her husband James and their son Bart in Davenport, Iowa. James would eventually become a local chiropractor. Now, this photograph was taken in 1981, but by 1982, the couple was already speaking to attorneys about possibly filing for divorce. By March 13th, 1983, Joyce discovered some papers in her husband's office that basically confirmed he was going through with filing for divorce. On March 17th, 1983, Joyce secretly records the conversation between her and her husband. Unfortunately, it wasn't the greatest recording. It was more like garbled, but you did hear a lot of kind of ins and outs of the conversation. At one point, you can hear Joyce say something along the lines of, "And you tried to kill me, stuffing my head down the side of the bed." And then you can hear Jim say, "I was trying to kill you, yeah." Joyce would be heard saying, "You were trying to hurt me. You even said you'd cut me into tiny little pieces." On the recording, he just says, "Oh, it's just dramatics." On March 18th, 1983, Joyce is reported missing. Her friends, her family, her neighbors, no one could find where she was. No one can get a hold of her. Her vehicle would be found the next day at a nearby hotel. And also, thankfully, Joyce had given that recording to her neighbors, and then the neighbors gave that crazy recording to the police. By March 30th, they get a warrant and they're able to search the home of the Klindt family. In the house, they find a chainsaw, and that chainsaw has clumps of hair stuck in it. On April 16th, 1983, in the East Moline area of the Mississippi River, 2 fishermen find a torso floating in the river. Then a stomach, then human intestines. They determined that the torso had been cut with a chainsaw. They never recovered the entire body. Now, in 1983, DNA is not as advanced, obviously, as it is now. They were able to determine that the blood type of the torso is the same exact blood type as Joyce, type A. By 1984, they were able to take DNA from Joyce's son and her family members and conclude that the torso was, in fact, Joyce Klindt. On February 17, 1984, James tries to take out the life insurance policy he had on his wife, saying that she was dead. The following month, he is arrested and charged with her murder. Now, he tried lying and said that, oh, Joyce has been seen by 3 people, but that was all just a lie. He actually went through 2 different trials. The first ended in a hung jury. In the second trial, he was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was paroled in 2004. He opened a taco shop. In 2010, he died from a fall. On the afternoon of June 8, 2017, a man would be found murdered on his own snake farm. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Ben Renick. Viewer discretion is advised. He was cute. This is Ben and his wife, Lynn Lee. The 2 of them had a child together, and Lynn Lee had another child from a previous relationship. Now, Ben operated the Renick Snake Farm. It was primarily a snake breeding center. They specialized in pythons and anacondas, and they would sell these snakes for thousands upon thousands of dollars. Now, in 2017, Ben was already working on a plan to sell a portion of Renick Snake Farm to an NHL player. This was going to be for the sum of about $1.2 million. And then, on June 8th, 2017, Lynn Lee Renick would call 911 in a panic. She claimed that one of the pythons crushed her husband Ben, and that he had died. When police got there, they started rounding up all of the snakes looking for the suspect, when one of the investigators noticed a shell casing. And then they took a look at Ben. He wasn't crushed by a snake. He had been shot multiple times. For nearly 3 years, police had no real evidence as to who might have done this. They tossed around the idea that maybe this was some sort of robbery gone wrong. The NHL player he was dealing with, he was cleared. And then suddenly, police got a tip. A man by the name of Brandon Blackwell, who had been dating Lynn Lee, came forward to police to say that she, Lynn Lee, confessed to murdering her husband. It turns out she tried to poison Ben about a year before. She laced one of his protein shakes with a high level of narcotics. While it made him sick, it didn't kill him. So her and a co-worker devised another plan as to how to kill Ben. Now, why is she doing this, by the way? Well, she caught wind that Ben was thinking about leaving her. She was afraid that Ben was going to take the kids from her. He's selling a portion of the snake farm, so she has to end him. Because, divorce is just so tedious. She needed money. She had her own business, a spa business, but it failed. If Ben left her, she got nothing. So finally she enlisted the help of another boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. The plan was for him to shoot Ben, but he backed out last minute. So Lynn Lee fired the kill shots. They were both charged with murder. Both were convicted. Michael got life in prison, and Lynn Lee only got 13 years. The fuck? Ugh.